My name is Madison Claire Harper, and I'm 26 years old. At exactly 2 a.m. last Wednesday, my phone buzzed with a text that changed everything. The message was from my dad, who had been missing for 3 months. Grab your sister and run. Don't trust your mother. Life depends on it. Go to cabin. Key under blue stone. Will explain later. Trust no one else. My hands shook as I read it again, my heart hammering against my ribs. Dad had vanished without a trace, and Mom claimed he'd abandoned us. But now my phone was buzzing with calls from unknown numbers, and something deep in my gut told me to move fast. Before I dive into what happened next, I want to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below, and don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more shocking family drama stories. Trust me, you won't believe what I discovered when I followed my dad's desperate warning. Let's get into this nightmare that turned my entire world upside down. I threw on clothes faster than I'd ever moved in my life, grabbed my car keys, and raced through the empty Denver streets toward the University of Colorado Boulder. My sister Lily Rose Harper was 19, a sophomore majoring in environmental science, and she had no idea our lives were about to explode. The 45-minute drive felt like hours as my mind raced through the past 3 months since Dad disappeared. Robert Harper had been a successful construction company owner, built the business from nothing over 20 years. He was methodical, careful, never the type to just vanish without explanation. Mom had painted a different picture though. Catherine Lynn Harper told everyone that Dad had been acting erratic, talking about conspiracy theories, claiming someone was watching our family. She filed a missing person report, played the devastated wife perfectly, even hired a private investigator. But something about her performance always felt off to me. The tears seemed forced, her grief too rehearsed. When I'd ask specific questions about Dad's behavior, her answers were vague and contradictory. I parked outside Lily's dorm and called her frantically. Madison? It's 2:30 in the morning, what's wrong? Her sleepy voice made this nightmare feel even more real. I need you to pack a bag right now. Don't ask questions. Dad contacted me and we need to leave immediately. There was silence, then rustling. Madison, you're scaring me. Dad's been gone for months. How did he contact you? I could hear the fear creeping into her voice, but I didn't have time to explain properly. When I reached her floor, Lily was already dressed with a small backpack. Her dark hair was pulled back messily, and her green eyes were wide with confusion and fear. What's happening? Where are we going? I showed her Dad's text, watching her face go pale in the hallway fluorescent lighting. This doesn't make sense. Why would he say not to trust Mom? Before I could answer, we heard heavy footsteps in the stairwell and voices that didn't belong to college students. Campus security, one voice called out, but something about the tone made my skin crawl. These weren't rent-a-cops doing routine rounds. They were asking specific questions about me, describing my car, wanting to know if anyone had seen Madison Harper on campus. Lily grabbed my arm, her grip tight with panic. There's a maintenance tunnel system I know from my work-study job. We can get to the parking garage through the basement. We moved through corridors I'd never seen, past boiler rooms and storage areas, our footsteps echoing in the concrete tunnels. Lily led confidently despite the circumstances, and I realized how much my little sister had grown up since starting college. When we finally reached my car, I noticed a black SUV parked suspiciously in the shadows, engine running despite the late hour. I started my Honda Civic as casually as possible, but the moment we pulled onto the street, the SUV followed. Madison, why is that car following us? Lily's voice was steady, but I could see her hands shaking in the dashboard light. I explained Dad's message while taking random turns through Boulder's residential neighborhoods, trying to lose our tail. The black SUV stayed with us, maintaining distance but never letting us out of sight. Lily, I need you to think carefully. Has Mom been asking you any strange questions lately? About Dad's work, or files he might have hidden? The question seemed to unlock something in Lily's memory. Actually, yes. She's been calling me every few days, which is weird because she usually just texts. She keeps asking if Dad ever gave me anything to hold on to, any papers or documents. She said she was trying to organize his office for when he comes back, but something about her questions felt off. We were heading into the mountains now, following the winding road toward the old family cabin, but the SUV was still behind us, its headlights cutting through the darkness like predatory eyes. I grabbed my phone to call Mom, then stopped. Dad's text had been crystal clear, "Don't trust your mother." But that seemed impossible. Mom had been the one comforting us, organizing search efforts, dealing with police reports. How could she be the threat? Then I remembered something that had been bothering me for weeks. The day after Dad disappeared, Mom had seemed remarkably calm for someone whose husband had just vanished. No panic, no desperate phone calls to his friends, just methodical efficiency in handling his absence. The mountain road was getting steeper, and I could see our followers were having trouble keeping up with my smaller car on the tight curves. "There's something else," Lily said quietly, staring out at the pine trees rushing past our windows. "Mom's been asking me about Dad's health, whether I thought he seemed confused or paranoid before he disappeared. She keeps pushing this narrative that he was having some kind of mental breakdown, but Madison, Dad seemed fine when I last saw him. Stressed maybe, but not crazy." As we reached the final stretch toward the cabin, I realized my phone had been buzzing constantly with calls from the same unknown numbers that had started right after Dad's text. Someone had been tracking my phone, knew exactly when I'd received that message, and had mobilized quickly to find us. I turned off my phone and threw it out the window, watching it shatter on the asphalt. Whatever was happening, we were completely on our own now. The family cabin sat in a clearing surrounded by towering pines, exactly as I remembered from childhood summers. Dad had inherited it from his father, and it had always been our refuge from the world. The key was exactly where Dad said it would be, under the blue-painted stone by the front steps. Inside, everything looked normal at first glance, but I knew Dad well enough to look deeper. He'd always been paranoid about security, probably came from growing up poor and having to fight for everything he achieved. Lily was examining family photos on the mantel when I noticed something odd about the bookshelf in Dad's study. The books weren't arranged the way he usually kept them, and there were small scratches on the floor suggesting the whole unit had been moved recently. I remember Dad showing me a hidden space behind these shelves when I was 12, telling me it was our family's emergency backup plan. "Help me move this," I told Lily, and together we slid the heavy wooden bookshelf aside. Behind it was a steel door with an electronic lock that required a 6-digit code. I tried Dad's birthday, then Mom's, then mine and Lily's. Nothing worked. Then I remembered the date Dad had bought his first construction contract, the day that changed our family's fortune forever. The lock clicked open with a soft beep, revealing a staircase leading down into a hidden basement office that definitely hadn't existed during our childhood visits. The room was incredible, like something from a spy movie. Multiple monitors lined one wall, filing cabinets filled another, and the third wall was covered with photographs, documents, and red string connecting various pieces of evidence. This wasn't just a home office, it was a full-scale investigation center. Dad had been working on something massive, something that required this level of secrecy and preparation. The computers were still running, password protected, but the paper files were accessible and told a story that made my blood run cold. Harper Construction wasn't just building commercial properties and residential developments. According to these documents, we were involved in something much darker. Contracts showed buildings with substandard materials being used while billing clients for premium components. Invoices listed phantom workers who didn't exist but were drawing full salaries. Project costs were inflated by hundreds of thousands of dollars per job, with the excess money disappearing into offshore accounts that Dad had been tracking meticulously. But the financial crimes were just the beginning. Photos showed Mom meeting with Vincent Torres, a man whose name appeared frequently in newspaper articles about organized crime in Colorado. These weren't casual encounters either. The pictures showed intimate conversations, document exchanges, and in several shots, Mom and Vincent were clearly in a romantic relationship. My mother, the grieving widow who'd been crying on local news about her missing husband, had been having an affair with a known criminal. Lily found Dad's personal journal buried under a stack of financial records, and her face went white as she read. Madison, listen to this. March 15th. Catherine doesn't know I've discovered her relationship with Torres. The construction company is being used to launder money for his operation, and she's been facilitating everything for at least 2 years. I have enough evidence to bring down the entire network, but I need to protect my daughters first. If anything happens to me, they'll come for Madison and Lily next. The room felt like it was spinning as I processed what we'd discovered. Our family business, built by Dad's sweat and sacrifice, had been corrupted by Mom's greed and infidelity. But more terrifying was the realization that Dad had known about the danger and had been trying to protect us. His disappearance wasn't abandonment, it was him being eliminated by people who couldn't afford to let his investigation continue. My phone rang, the old landline that Dad had installed in the cabin years ago. The caller ID showed our home number. Madison? Mom's voice was different now, lacking the warmth and concern she'd been performing for months. Madison, I know you're at the cabin. Bring your sister home immediately. We need to discuss your father's condition and get you both the help you need. There was something cold and calculated in her tone that made my skin crawl. Mom, where is Dad really? And why didn't you tell us about Vincent Torres? The silence stretched for long seconds. Madison, your father has been very sick. He's been paranoid, delusional, making up stories about our family and business. Vincent is a family friend who's been helping me deal with Robert's mental health crisis. You need to come home so we can get you proper counseling. But I could hear the lie in every word, the careful phrasing of someone who'd rehearsed this conversation. I hung up without responding, my hands shaking as I turned to Lily. She knows we're here. We need to find out what else Dad discovered and get out of here fast. But Lily was staring at something on Dad's desk, her face pale with a mixture of shock and understanding. Madison, there's something I never told you. For the past few months, Mom's been making me special coffee in the mornings when I visit home. She always insists I drink it all, says it's a new blend she wants my opinion on. But afterward, I always feel foggy and tired for hours. The implication hit me like a physical blow. Mom hadn't just been deceiving us. She'd been systematically drugging Dad to make him seem unstable and unreliable. If she'd been doing the same thing to Lily during her visits home, then Mom was capable of far more than just financial crimes and adultery. She was willing to poison her own family to protect her secrets and maintain her facade of innocence. As if summoned by our growing understanding, we heard car engines approaching the cabin. Multiple vehicles, moving fast up the mountain road. Dad's hidden office suddenly felt less like a sanctuary and more like a trap. We'd found the evidence we needed to understand the truth, but now we had to survive long enough to do something about it. Dad's computer system was more sophisticated than I'd realized. While Lily kept watch at the windows, I managed to access his files using a password combination of our family dog's name and the date he'd first taken Mom on a date. What I found made me sick to my stomach but also filled me with a burning rage that gave me strength to keep going. Dad had been recording everything for months, using hidden cameras throughout our family home to document Mom's real behavior when she thought no one was watching. The first video showed Mom systematically going through Dad's home office, removing documents and files while he was at work. She wasn't just cleaning or organizing. She was deliberately destroying evidence that Dad had been collecting about the construction company's fraudulent activities. In another clip, she was on the phone with someone, clearly Vincent based on her intimate tone, discussing how to handle the Robert situation more permanently. But the most damning footage showed Mom preparing Dad's morning coffee ritual, the same routine she'd maintained for 15 years of marriage. Except now she was adding something from a small vial to his cup, stirring carefully to dissolve whatever substance she was using to drug him. The timestamp showed this had been happening daily for over 6 months, explaining Dad's gradual decline in energy and mental clarity that we'd all attributed to work stress. Lily found video files labeled with dates from the past year, and we watched in horror as they revealed the calculated destruction of our family. Mom staging arguments with Dad, provoking him when he was already disoriented from whatever drugs she was giving him, then recording his confused reactions on her phone. She was building a case to prove his mental instability, creating evidence that would support her claims about his paranoid delusions and erratic behavior. "Look at this," Lily whispered, pointing to a folder titled Financial Transfers. The videos showed Mom accessing Dad's business accounts from his home computer, moving large sums of money to accounts that Dad had been tracking as part of the money laundering operation. She wasn't just facilitating Vincent's criminal enterprise, she was actively stealing from Harper Construction's clients and blaming the missing funds on Dad's supposed incompetence and mental decline. The scope of Mom's deception was staggering. For over 2 years, she'd been living a complete double life, playing the devoted wife while systematically destroying her husband and stealing from the business he'd built. Every family dinner, every conversation about Dad's stress levels, every moment of apparent concern for his well-being had been a performance designed to cover her crimes and justify her eventual plan to eliminate him entirely. A particularly chilling video showed Mom meeting with a private investigator, not to find Dad after his disappearance, but to track his movements and activities in the weeks before he vanished. She'd hired someone to spy on her own husband, gathering intelligence that would help Vincent's organization stay ahead of Dad's investigation. The investigator handed her detailed reports about Dad's meetings, his research activities, even his visits to potential witnesses who might have information about the construction fraud. We found evidence that Mom had been moving money steadily for months, not just stealing from the business but also liquidating family assets and transferring the proceeds to offshore accounts. The family home was mortgaged to its maximum value, retirement accounts had been emptied, even the children's college funds had been drained. While playing the grieving wife, Mom had been systematically looting everything Dad had worked to build for our family's future. The sound of vehicle doors slamming outside interrupted our investigation. Through the window, we could see 3 men approaching the cabin, moving with military precision and clearly armed. But walking behind them was a familiar figure that made my heart sink even further. Uncle David Mitchell, Dad's younger brother and business partner, was leading the group toward our hiding place. David had always been the fun uncle, the one who took us camping and taught us to fish in this same mountain lake. He'd been Dad's closest ally in building the construction business, supposedly the one person in our extended family who could be trusted completely. But here he was, coordinating with armed men who were obviously here to eliminate any witnesses to Mom's crimes. "I need to call for help," I told Lily, reaching for Dad's landline, but she grabbed my wrist. "Madison, who can we call? If Uncle David is involved, how many other people in our lives are part of this? The police, Dad's friends, our neighbors, how do we know who's safe?" She was right, and the realization that our entire support network might be compromised left us more isolated than ever. We could hear David's voice now, calling out to us with false warmth and concern. "Madison. Lily. It's Uncle David. Your mom sent me to bring you home safely. Your dad contacted me too, and we need to talk about his condition. He's not well, girls, and he's been saying things that aren't true. Come out so we can help you understand what's really happening." But something in his tone, combined with the presence of armed men, made it clear that surrendering would be fatal. The cabin's layout suddenly became critical to our survival. Dad had shown us the building's secrets during childhood visits, including a root cellar accessible through a hidden trapdoor in the kitchen floor. The cellar connected to an old mining tunnel that had been dug in the 1800s, back when prospectors were searching these mountains for silver. If we could reach that tunnel system, we might be able to escape before David and his men found Dad's hidden office. As we prepared to abandon our investigation, Lily grabbed one final piece of evidence that would prove crucial later. Hidden behind Dad's computer monitor was a small device that looked like a USB drive but was actually a portable hard drive containing copies of everything we'd discovered. Dad had prepared this backup specifically for the situation we now faced, knowing that someday his daughters might need proof of what had really happened to destroy our family. The moment we heard David's voice calling our names with fake concern, I knew we'd underestimated the scope of this conspiracy. But it wasn't until I crept to the kitchen window and watched him directing the armed men that I understood how completely our family had been infiltrated. This wasn't just Mom and Vincent, this was a coordinated operation involving people we'd trusted our entire lives. David was giving detailed instructions about the cabin's layout, pointing out windows and doors with the familiarity of someone who'd spent decades visiting this place. He knew about Dad's security measures, his hiding spots, even the old mining tunnels that we thought were our secret escape route. "Check the basement first," he told one of the gunmen. "Robert always hides things underground. If the girls found his files, they'll try to run through the mine shaft." I ducked back down and whispered to Lily, "He knows about everything. Uncle David has been feeding information to Mom and Vincent for who knows how long." The betrayal cut deeper than Mom's crimes because David had always been our ally, the family member who supported Dad's dreams and helped build the construction business from nothing. How long had he been planning to destroy his own brother? From our hiding spot behind the kitchen island, we could hear David making a phone call. His voice was different now, dropping the false concern and revealing something cold and calculating underneath. "Yes, I found them. They're at the cabin just like you predicted. No, I don't think they've contacted anyone yet. We can handle this quietly and make it look like they never made it down from the mountain." The conversation continued with details that made my blood freeze. "The construction business is worth $15 million now, Catherine. Once Robert is officially declared dead and the girls are handled, you'll inherit everything as his widow. I'll manage the daily operations as his surviving business partner, and Vincent can expand his operations without interference. It's a perfect setup as long as we eliminate all the witnesses." Lily's hand found mine in the darkness, and I could feel her trembling as we realized the full scope of what we were facing. This wasn't just about covering up financial crimes. This was a coordinated plan to murder our entire immediate family and steal everything Dad had worked to build. Mom would play the tragic widow, David would step in as the grieving brother trying to hold the business together, and Vincent would have unlimited access to construction projects for his criminal enterprise. The armed men were searching the cabin systematically now, their heavy boots moving through the rooms above us while we crouched in Dad's secret hiding place. This room had been designed for exactly this scenario, soundproofed and hidden behind a false wall that looked like part of the cabin's original foundation. But I could hear them getting closer, testing floorboards and checking for hollow spaces behind walls. "We need to move now," I whispered to Lily, but as I reached for the tunnel entrance, we heard something that froze us both in place. David was talking to someone new, someone whose voice I recognized with a mixture of relief and terror. It was Detective William Brooks from the Denver Police Department, the same officer who'd been investigating Dad's disappearance and supposedly trying to help our family find answers. "The local sheriff won't be a problem," Detective Brooks was saying. "I've already filed reports indicating that Robert Harper was mentally unstable and possibly dangerous to his family. When we find the girls' bodies, the narrative will be that Robert killed them and then committed suicide somewhere in these mountains. Case closed, no further investigation needed." The corruption went even deeper than we'd imagined. The police officer we'd been trusting to find Dad was actually part of the conspiracy to eliminate our family. How many other officials were involved? How many people in positions of authority were working to ensure that none of us survived to expose the truth about Vincent's organization and its infiltration of legitimate businesses throughout Colorado? David's voice was getting closer as he coordinated the search. Robert was always too smart for his own good, but he made one crucial mistake. He trusted family. He never suspected that I was the one feeding information to Vincent about his investigation, his evidence gathering, his plans to expose the money laundering operation. For 2 years, I've been staying one step ahead of every move he made. The revelation about David's long-term betrayal explained so much that had puzzled us over the past few months. Dad's growing paranoia, his reluctance to discuss business details even with family, his decision to start investigating the company's finances in secret. He'd sensed something was wrong but hadn't been able to identify the source of the threat because it was coming from inside his own family. As the footsteps above us grew closer to our hiding spot, I made a desperate decision. The tunnel entrance was only a few feet away, but reaching it would require exposing ourselves briefly to anyone who might be watching the kitchen area. Lily, when I say go, we run for the tunnel. Don't look back, don't hesitate, just follow me into the mine shaft and keep moving until we reach the other side of the mountain. But as we prepared to make our escape, David's voice called out with chilling certainty, Madison. Lily. I know you can hear me, and I know exactly where you're hiding. Your father showed me that secret room when you were children. There's no way out except through us, so you might as well come out and let's discuss this like family. The false warmth in his voice was more terrifying than any direct threat because it reminded us of all the times we'd trusted him, all the family gatherings where he'd played the loving uncle while secretly planning our destruction. How many conversations had he reported back to Vincent? How many family secrets had he shared to help them stay ahead of Dad's investigation? We could hear them moving furniture above us, getting ready to force entry into Dad's hidden office. In minutes, they'd discover the evidence we'd found, and then they'd come looking for us with even more urgency. Our window for escape was closing rapidly, but the tunnel represented our only chance for survival. The mine shaft was exactly as I remembered from childhood adventures, a narrow tunnel carved into solid rock that connected several abandoned mining sites throughout the mountain range. Dad had taught us to navigate these passages during our camping trips, explaining that miners in the 1800s had created an extensive underground network while searching for silver deposits. What he hadn't told us then was that he was preparing us for exactly this situation. We moved through the darkness using the flashlight app on Lily's phone, trying to balance speed with silence. Behind us, we could hear David and his men discovering the hidden office, their voices echoing through the tunnel entrance as they realized we'd found Dad's evidence and escaped. They can't have gotten far, David was shouting. These tunnels only go 2 directions, and I know every exit point. Split up and cut them off before they reach the valley. Lily was keeping up well despite her injured ankle from our hasty escape down the rocky tunnel entrance. She'd twisted it badly when we'd jumped into the mine shaft, and I could tell she was fighting pain with every step, but she never complained or asked to slow down. The danger we faced had awakened something fierce in my little sister, a determination to survive that reminded me of Dad's stubborn refusal to give up on anything he believed in. After what felt like hours of underground travel, we emerged from a tunnel opening hidden behind a waterfall about 3 miles from the cabin. The morning sun was rising over the mountains, and we could hear helicopter rotors in the distance. Vincent's organization had resources we hadn't anticipated, including aircraft that could search the mountain terrain far more effectively than men on foot. Our clothes were soaked from the waterfall, and we were both exhausted from the underground journey, but we couldn't stop moving. The old logging road Dad had shown us years ago was still there, overgrown but passable, leading down toward the main highway and civilization. But as we started walking, the helicopter sounds grew closer, and I realized they were conducting a systematic grid search of the entire area. We took shelter in a dense grove of pine trees, watching the helicopter circle overhead while trying to plan our next move. The problem was that we couldn't trust anyone in our normal support network. If David was involved and Detective Brooks was corrupt, how many other people in our lives were part of this conspiracy? Our neighbors, Dad's business associates, even family friends could be reporting our movements back to Vincent. The helicopter moved on after several terrifying minutes, but we could hear vehicles on the roads below, multiple engines suggesting that David had called in additional help for the ground search. We needed to reach civilization and contact someone who could help us, but we also needed to avoid anyone who might recognize us and report our location to the wrong people. By late morning, we reached a small mountain town called Cedar Falls, population maybe 500 people according to the welcome sign. It was the kind of place where strangers stood out immediately, but it was also our best chance of finding transportation and communication without being detected by Vincent's network. The town had one main street with a diner, a gas station, and a few small shops that probably served the local ranching community. We cleaned up as best we could in the gas station bathroom, trying to look like hiking tourists rather than fugitives running for our lives. But when we entered the diner for breakfast, the local news was playing on the television above the counter, and our faces were prominently displayed in a missing persons report. The story claimed that Madison and Lily Harper had disappeared from their homes, possibly suffering from the same mental health crisis that had affected their father. The news report showed Mom crying convincingly for the cameras, begging for our safe return while warning that we might be dangerous to ourselves and others due to inherited psychological instability. Detective Brooks appeared as an expert commentator, explaining that missing person cases involving family members with mental health issues often ended tragically if the subjects weren't found quickly and given appropriate medical intervention. But the diner owner, an elderly man named Frank Coleman, was watching the news with obvious skepticism. When he noticed us sitting in the corner booth, his expression changed to recognition, but instead of reaching for the phone, he approached our table with coffee and a concerned frown. "You girls are the Harper sisters, aren't you? I knew your father years ago, before he made it big in construction. Robert used to stop here when he was working small jobs in the mountains." Frank's kindness felt like a lifeline after hours of running from people who wanted to kill us. "Your dad came through here about 3 months ago, seemed scared and looking over his shoulder constantly. He left a package with me, said if anything happened to him, I should give it to his daughters if they ever came looking for answers. Wait here." He disappeared into the kitchen, returning with a manila envelope that had our names written in Dad's careful handwriting. Inside the envelope was a USB drive containing copies of all the evidence we'd found at the cabin, plus additional files that Dad had compiled about Vincent's criminal organization. There was also a handwritten letter explaining that he'd suspected David's involvement for weeks before his disappearance and had been trying to gather enough evidence to expose the entire network. The letter ended with instructions for contacting Maria Santos, a sergeant from Dad's Army unit who worked as a private security consultant in Denver. Frank also provided crucial information about the scope of Vincent's influence in Colorado law enforcement. "Your dad was investigating corruption that goes way beyond your family's construction business. Vincent Torres has been placing people in government positions for years, building a network that protects his operations and eliminates threats. That's why you can't trust the regular police or FBI field offices. This thing goes all the way to the top of state government." Frank's nephew Tommy Garcia had just returned from military service in Iraq and was working at the diner while transitioning to civilian life. Tommy immediately understood the tactical situation we faced and offered to help us reach Maria Santos safely. "These guys are hunting you with professional resources, but they're not expecting military-level countermeasures. I can get you to Denver using back roads they won't be watching." But as we were preparing to leave with Tommy, 3 black SUVs pulled into the diner parking lot, and we could see David Mitchell getting out of the lead vehicle. Frank moved quickly, pushing us toward the kitchen while calling out to the other customers, "Health department inspection. Everyone needs to clear the dining room immediately." The local patrons understood this was code for serious trouble and evacuated quickly through the front door. Tommy led us through the kitchen to a delivery entrance behind the diner, where his pickup truck was parked next to the dumpster. But as we reached the vehicle, gunfire erupted inside the diner, and we could hear Frank shouting at David's men to get out of his establishment. We climbed into Tommy's truck and drove away as fast as possible, leaving behind the one person who'd shown us kindness when we desperately needed help. The gunfire stopped as we reached the main road, but Tommy's radio crackled with police chatter indicating that multiple law enforcement units were converging on Cedar Falls. "They're spinning this as a terrorist incident," Tommy said grimly, claiming that armed fugitives attacked a local business and that civilians are in danger. "Every cop in 3 counties is going to be looking for us now." Our situation had escalated from a family crisis to a statewide manhunt, with corrupt officials using government resources to track us down and eliminate us. But we had Dad's evidence, we knew Maria Santos could help us, and we had Tommy's military expertise to help us stay ahead of our pursuers. The question was whether we could reach Denver alive and find someone in law enforcement who wasn't part of Vincent's network. Maria Santos lived in a converted warehouse in Denver's industrial district, a location that became clear was chosen specifically for its security advantages. The building had multiple entry and exit points, clear sight lines in all directions, and enough distance from neighboring structures to detect approaching vehicles or surveillance teams. When Tommy called ahead using a coded phrase that Dad had apparently arranged months ago, Maria was ready for our arrival with the kind of preparation that suggested she'd been expecting this emergency. Sergeant Maria Santos was exactly what I'd expected from Dad's Army stories: tough, competent, and absolutely no nonsense in her approach to danger. She greeted us at a side entrance that wasn't visible from the street, quickly ushered us inside, and immediately began asking precise questions about our situation that revealed she already knew far more about our family's crisis than we'd anticipated. "Your father contacted me 6 weeks ago," Maria explained as she led us through a maze of storage rooms to her living space. "He said his investigation had uncovered something massive, but he needed time to compile evidence before bringing in outside help. When he stopped responding to my messages 3 weeks later, I knew Vincent Torres had made his move. I've been monitoring police communications since then, waiting for you girls to surface." Maria's warehouse was equipped like a tactical operations center, with multiple computer stations monitoring news feeds, police scanners, and what appeared to be intercepted communications from various criminal organizations operating in Colorado. She'd been tracking Vincent's network for over a year as part of her private security business, which specialized in protecting whistleblowers and witnesses in organized crime cases. The scope of Vincent's corruption was even more extensive than we'd realized. Maria showed us files documenting his infiltration of construction companies throughout the western United States, using legitimate businesses to launder money from drug trafficking, human trafficking, and weapons smuggling. Harper Construction was just one of dozens of companies that had been compromised, but Dad's investigation had threatened to expose the entire network. "The construction business is perfect for money laundering," Maria explained, pulling up financial records on her computer. "You can inflate project costs, create phantom workers, ship materials that don't actually exist, and move huge amounts of cash through seemingly legitimate transactions. Vincent has been perfecting this system for over a decade, and it generates hundreds of millions in clean money annually." But Maria had discovered something even more disturbing in her investigation. Vincent wasn't just running financial crimes, his organization was involved in human trafficking, using construction sites as temporary holding facilities for people being smuggled across state lines. The substandard building materials and inflated costs weren't just about stealing money, they were about creating structures that could be modified quickly for illegal purposes. Detective Rachel Murphy appeared at the warehouse entrance just as Maria was explaining the human trafficking operation. Rachel was one of the few Denver police officers that Maria trusted completely, someone who'd been investigating Vincent's organization from within the police department while maintaining her cover as a regular detective. Her arrival meant that we finally had law enforcement help from someone who wasn't part of the corruption. "Your father's evidence is exactly what we've been waiting for," Rachel said as she reviewed the files we'd recovered from the cabin. "We've been building a case against Vincent for 2 years, but we needed proof of the financial connections between his criminal activities and the legitimate businesses he's been using for cover. This construction company documentation shows the money trail that connects everything. Kevin Chang, a forensic accountant who worked with Maria's security firm, joined us that evening to analyze the financial records Dad had compiled. His preliminary review revealed that over $50 million had been laundered through Harper Construction and associated businesses over the past 3 years. But more importantly, the money trail connected Vincent's organization to corrupt officials in multiple government agencies. This isn't just local corruption, Kevin explained, pointing to bank routing numbers and transaction patterns on his laptop screen. Vincent has been paying bribes to judges, prosecutors, police chiefs, and even state legislators. The money from his criminal activities has been used to buy protection at every level of government. That's why your family's investigation was so dangerous to them. Lily had been quiet during most of these briefings, but she suddenly spoke up with information that added another crucial piece to the puzzle. "I've been recording Mom's phone calls for the past month," she said, pulling out her smartphone. "I started doing it because her questions about Dad seemed so strange, but I never imagined she was planning to kill us. Some of these conversations are with people I don't recognize, talking about timelines and permanent solutions to family problems." The recorded phone calls provided direct evidence of Mom's involvement in planning our elimination. In one particularly chilling conversation, she discussed the best way to stage our deaths to look like a murder-suicide, with Vincent suggesting that drug overdoses would be easier to fake than gunshot wounds. The calls also revealed that Mom had been stealing from the business for over 2 years, gradually transferring money to offshore accounts in preparation for her new life with Vincent. Maria's analysis of our situation confirmed what we'd suspected. Vincent's organization had resources that rivaled law enforcement agencies, including surveillance equipment, communications intercepts, and corrupt contacts throughout government. "They know we're here," she said bluntly. "Maybe not this exact location yet, but they know you've made contact with people who can help you. We need to move fast before they bring in enough resources to overwhelm our defensive capabilities." The plan that emerged from our strategy session was both simple and terrifying. We would use Dad's evidence and Kevin's financial analysis to contact the FBI's Organized Crime Task Force, specifically agents who weren't based in Colorado and therefore less likely to be compromised by Vincent's network. Meanwhile, Rachel would coordinate with honest police officers to prepare for arrests once federal agents took control of the investigation. But first, we had to survive long enough to make contact with federal authorities, and Maria's intelligence suggested that Vincent was preparing for a final assault to eliminate all witnesses and evidence. David Mitchell had been coordinating with corrupt police officials to organize what would appear to be a legitimate law enforcement operation, complete with warrants and federal agency cooperation, designed to capture or kill us under the cover of official authority. Tommy had been monitoring radio communications and reported that multiple agencies were positioning resources around Denver, ostensibly to locate and apprehend the dangerous Harper sisters who were wanted in connection with terrorist activities in Cedar Falls. The scope of the manhunt suggested that Vincent was using every corrupt contact he'd developed over years of bribery and intimidation. As we prepared for what Maria called the final confrontation, I realized that our family's destruction had been planned for years, not months. Every relationship Mom had cultivated, every business decision Dad had made, every family gathering with Uncle David had been part of a long-term strategy to position Vincent's organization to take control of Harper Construction and eliminate anyone who might expose their criminal activities. The evidence we'd gathered could bring down not just Vincent's organization, but an entire network of corruption that had infected multiple levels of government in Colorado and neighboring states. But only if we survived long enough to deliver that evidence to honest federal agents who could act on it without being stopped by corrupt local officials. Maria's intelligence network had finally located Dad, and the news was both devastating and hopeful. He was being held at a downtown construction site that Harper Construction had been renovating. A bitter irony that Vincent was using Dad's own company's resources to imprison him. The building was scheduled for demolition in 2 days, which meant Vincent planned to eliminate the evidence of Dad's imprisonment by literally burying it under tons of concrete and steel. The rescue plan required precision timing and resources we didn't have. The construction site was guarded by Vincent's men who were posing as legitimate security contractors, and the building itself was rigged with surveillance equipment that would detect any normal approach. But Tommy's military experience and Maria's tactical expertise had identified a weakness: the building's basement connected to Denver's old sewer system, providing an underground approach that wouldn't trigger their electronic defenses. Detective Rachel Murphy used her official access to obtain building blueprints and security company schedules, information that revealed Dad was being held in a reinforced storage room in the basement level. According to the construction timeline, the room had been designed as a vault for valuable materials, with steel-reinforced walls and electronic locks that made it perfect for holding prisoners. Vincent had been planning this imprisonment for months, not just as a way to silence Dad, but as psychological torture. We entered the sewer system through a maintenance access point 6 blocks from the construction site, wading through knee-deep water that smelled like everything terrible about urban decay. The tunnels were exactly as disgusting as expected, but they provided cover from Vincent's surveillance network and allowed us to approach the building without being detected. Tommy led the way, using night vision equipment that Maria had provided, while Lily and I followed with waterproof bags containing Dad's evidence and communication equipment. The basement entrance required bypassing an alarm system that Kevin had disabled remotely by hacking into the security company's network. His forensic accounting skills apparently extended to cybersecurity, and he'd been able to create a temporary blind spot in their monitoring systems that would give us 30 minutes to locate Dad and extract him before the guards realized they'd been compromised. We found Dad in conditions that made me want to kill Vincent Torres with my bare hands. He'd been chained to a concrete wall for weeks, given just enough food and water to keep him alive while Vincent's men tortured him for information about hidden evidence and offshore accounts. His physical condition was terrible, but his mind was clear for the first time in months because Mom was no longer drugging him with whatever substances she'd been putting in his coffee. Madison? Lily? Dad's voice was weak but filled with relief and terror. You shouldn't be here. Vincent knows you escaped from the cabin, and he's planning to eliminate our entire family tonight. There are more guards upstairs, and David is coordinating with corrupt police to stage a raid that will justify killing you as dangerous fugitives. Dad's information confirmed our worst fears about the scope of tonight's operation. Vincent wasn't just planning to silence us. He was preparing to eliminate all evidence of his organization's activities in Colorado and relocate to a different region where law enforcement hadn't yet identified his network. Our family's destruction was part of a larger exit strategy that would leave dozens of unsolved crimes and hundreds of victims without justice. But as we worked to free Dad from his restraints, alarms began blaring throughout the building. Our 30-minute window had been compromised, either by better security than Kevin had anticipated or by corrupt officials who detected Rachel's access to police databases. Heavy footsteps echoed through the building above us, and we could hear David Mitchell's voice coordinating a systematic search that would inevitably lead to our location. Tommy immediately shifted into combat mode, using his military training to assess our tactical situation and plan defensive positions. But we were outnumbered by professionally armed men in a building that they controlled, with limited ammunition and no backup support. Our only advantage was detailed knowledge of the building's layout and the element of surprise, both of which were rapidly diminishing as Vincent's men organized their search. Dad was too weak to move quickly, and Lily was still favoring her injured ankle from our escape through the mine tunnels. Any rescue attempt would require splitting our small team, with some people staying behind to slow down the pursuit while others escaped with the evidence needed to bring down Vincent's organization. The mathematics of survival were brutal, and everyone understood that not all of us were likely to make it out alive. Vincent Torres himself appeared in the basement, flanked by 6 heavily armed men and wearing body armor that suggested he was prepared for serious resistance. His appearance marked the escalation from capture to execution. There would be no more attempts to extract information or negotiate surrenders. He decided that the Harper family represented an unacceptable threat that needed to be eliminated permanently, regardless of the attention it might attract. "Robert, you should have accepted my initial offer and retired quietly," Vincent said, his voice carrying the casual tone of someone discussing business rather than murder. "Your investigation was impressive, but ultimately pointless. I've been paying officials to look the other way for over a decade, and your daughter's evidence won't change anything. After tonight, the Harper family will be remembered as a tragic example of mental illness and domestic violence." David stepped forward with handcuffs, clearly intending to restrain us for transport to whatever location Vincent had chosen for our executions. But his positioning was a crucial mistake that Tommy recognized immediately. David was standing between Vincent's men and the sewer access point, creating a moment of tactical opportunity that wouldn't last more than seconds. Tommy's military training took over, and he moved with speed and precision that caught everyone off guard. His attack on David created enough confusion for me to grab Lily and start moving toward the sewer entrance, but we were still trapped in a basement with multiple armed men between us and freedom. The firefight that erupted was brief but devastating, with gunfire echoing off concrete walls and ricocheting bullets making every movement potentially fatal. Dad made the ultimate sacrifice to save us, using his last reserves of strength to tackle Vincent and give us time to reach the sewer entrance. The impact sent both men tumbling into a pile of construction equipment, but Dad was too weak to maintain his advantage for more than a few seconds. Vincent's response was immediate and brutal, a gunshot that ended Dad's suffering but also ensured that his final act would haunt Vincent's conscience forever. We escaped through the sewer system as police sirens filled the downtown area, but we'd lost Dad and Tommy in the rescue attempt that was supposed to reunite our family. The evidence we'd gathered could still bring down Vincent's organization, but the cost of obtaining it had been higher than any of us had imagined. Our father was dead, and we were still being hunted by people with unlimited resources and no moral constraints. The loss of Dad and Tommy filled me with a rage that burned away my fear and replaced it with cold determination to destroy everyone who had contributed to my family's destruction. Maria and Rachel had assembled additional honest law enforcement officers, and Kevin's financial analysis had attracted attention from federal agents who specialized in organized crime cases. But Vincent still had Mom as a hostage, and David was coordinating with corrupt officials to stage one final operation that would eliminate all witnesses. Our strategy focused on forcing Vincent into a public confrontation where his criminal activities would be exposed to media attention and federal oversight. Kevin had prepared comprehensive financial documentation showing the money laundering operations, while Rachel had coordinated with FBI agents from outside Colorado who weren't compromised by Vincent's network. The evidence was overwhelming, but we needed to survive long enough to present it to people who could act on it. The confrontation began when I called Mom directly and offered to surrender in exchange for stopping the violence that had already claimed Dad's life and put innocent people like Frank Coleman in danger. Mom agreed to meet at our family home, the same place where she'd been systematically poisoning Dad for months while planning his murder. The location was symbolic, but it also provided tactical advantages because I knew every room and hiding place in the house where I'd grown up. Mom had dropped all pretense of being the grieving widow when I arrived at the house that evening. She was waiting in Dad's study, sitting behind his desk like she'd already claimed ownership of everything he'd built through decades of honest work. Her appearance was different too, more polished and confident, like someone who'd finally stopped playing a role and revealed her true nature. "Madison, you've caused so much unnecessary trouble," Mom said, her voice lacking any warmth or maternal concern. "Your father was planning to ruin everything we'd built, destroy the business with his paranoid accusations and moral objections to profitable opportunities. Vincent offered us a chance to expand internationally, to make real money instead of scratching out a living with small residential projects." The conversation that followed revealed the depth of Mom's resentment toward Dad and our family life. She'd felt trapped by domestic responsibilities, jealous of Dad's business success, and attracted to Vincent's promises of excitement and unlimited wealth. Her affair hadn't been just about romance, it had been about escaping what she saw as the boring constraints of middle-class respectability and family obligations. "You girls were just more obstacles to overcome," Mom continued, pouring herself a glass of wine with hands that didn't shake despite the magnitude of what she was confessing. Vincent needed assurance that there wouldn't be any family members seeking revenge or continuing Robert's investigation. "The original plan was to make your deaths look accidental, but you've forced us to be more direct in our approach." I was recording everything on my phone, knowing that Mom's confession would provide crucial evidence for federal prosecutors. But I was also buying time for Maria and Rachel to position their teams around the house, and for Kevin to transfer all financial evidence to FBI servers that Vincent's organization couldn't hack or destroy. Every minute Mom spent explaining her crimes was another minute for our allies to prepare for the final assault. Vincent arrived with a small army of corrupt officials and private security contractors, turning our residential neighborhood into what looked like a legitimate law enforcement operation. Detective Brooks was coordinating with federal agents who were actually Vincent's people wearing stolen badges and uniforms. The operation was designed to provide legal justification for killing me and Lily, with official reports claiming that we'd been armed and dangerous fugitives who'd resisted arrest. But Maria's intelligence network had anticipated this strategy, and honest federal agents were already in position to identify and arrest the corrupt officials when they revealed themselves by participating in Vincent's operation. The FBI had been investigating Vincent's network for over a year, using Dad's evidence to obtain warrants for surveillance and arrests that would happen simultaneously across multiple states. The final confrontation took place in our family's living room, where Lily and I had spent countless evenings doing homework while Dad worked on construction blueprints and Mom pretended to be a devoted wife and mother. Vincent was confident that his corrupt contacts would protect him from consequences, but he hadn't anticipated the scope of federal involvement or the quality of evidence that Dad had compiled before his capture. When Vincent pulled out a gun to end our resistance permanently, Lily surprised everyone by producing Dad's service pistol, which she'd taken from his study during our earlier visit to gather evidence. Her military training from Dad's instruction had prepared her for exactly this moment, and she didn't hesitate when Vincent threatened to kill me. The gunshot that ended Vincent Torres was fired by a 19-year-old college student who'd been forced to grow up too quickly, but who'd learned that sometimes violence is the only response to people who won't accept legal or moral constraints. Mom's attempt to claim innocence and blame everything on Vincent collapsed when federal agents played recordings of her phone conversations planning our murders. Her performance as the devastated widow had been perfect, but her confession to me provided evidence that no corrupt lawyer or judge could dismiss. The realization that she would spend the rest of her life in prison seemed to break something fundamental in her psychology, and her final words were a bitter complaint about the unfairness of facing consequences for choices she'd made freely. The arrests that followed included David Mitchell, Detective Brooks, and over 30 other officials who'd been receiving payments from Vincent's organization. The financial evidence that Kevin had compiled revealed corruption in city government, state agencies, and federal offices, leading to investigations that would continue for years. Our family's destruction had exposed a network of crime that had been operating across multiple states, victimizing thousands of people through various illegal enterprises. As I watched corrupt officials being led away in handcuffs, I felt a mixture of satisfaction and emptiness that surprised me. We'd succeeded in exposing the truth and obtaining justice for Dad's murder, but the cost had been the destruction of everything I'd believed about family loyalty and trust. Mom would die in prison, David was facing decades of imprisonment, and our construction business would probably never recover from the scandal and financial losses. 6 months after that horrible night when our world exploded in gunfire and betrayal, I'm sitting in the office that used to be Dad's, trying to rebuild Harper Construction into something he would be proud of. The business is smaller now, focused on honest projects that help communities rather than serving as a front for criminal organizations. Maria Santos has become our security consultant, ensuring that we never again become vulnerable to the kind of infiltration that destroyed our family. Lily transferred to a different university where she's studying criminal justice, determined to help other families who face similar threats from organized crime networks. She's stronger now in some ways, more confident and self-reliant, but she still has nightmares about the night she had to kill Vincent Torres to protect our family. We're both in therapy, trying to process the trauma of discovering that our mother had been planning our murders while we worried about her grief and tried to support her through Dad's disappearance. Dad's recovery from months of imprisonment and poisoning has been slower than we hoped, but his mind is clear now for the first time in over a year. The neurological damage from whatever drugs Mom had been giving him is gradually healing, though he still has memory gaps and concentration problems that frustrate his attempts to return to normal life. He's working with therapists who specialize in helping torture survivors, learning to trust people again after being betrayed by his wife and brother. The criminal trials provided a measure of justice but also forced us to relive the worst moments of our experience repeatedly. Mom received life in prison without possibility of parole for Dad's torture and the murders of Tommy Garcia and Frank Coleman. David was sentenced to 25 years for conspiracy and attempted murder, though his lawyers are appealing the conviction. Detective Brooks and 12 other corrupt officials received sentences ranging from 10 to 30 years, depending on their level of involvement in Vincent's organization. The financial recovery has been more complex than the criminal justice aspects. Vincent's money laundering operation had contaminated Harper Construction's accounts to the point where federal authorities froze most of our assets during their investigation. We're gradually recovering legitimate business funds, but the process requires proving that specific transactions weren't part of the criminal enterprise. Kevin Chang has become our permanent forensic accountant, helping us rebuild financial systems that are transparent and secure. I've found unexpected strength in helping other families who face similar threats from organized crime. Through Maria's security firm, we've assisted in protecting witnesses and gathering evidence in cases across several states. The skills I developed during our fight for survival, the ability to stay calm under pressure and think strategically about dangerous situations, have proven valuable in helping people who are facing the kind of terror we experienced. Tommy Garcia's family has become part of our extended support network, and his sacrifice has inspired us to create a foundation that provides financial assistance to families of victims of organized crime. His mother often says that Tommy would be proud to know that his military service continued to protect people even after his death, and that his final mission helped bring down a criminal network that was victimizing vulnerable communities throughout the region. The construction business is operating again, but with fundamental changes that reflect what we learned about the dangers of rapid expansion and insufficient oversight. We work on smaller projects that allow us to maintain direct supervision and ensure that our resources aren't being diverted for criminal purposes. Maria's security protocols include background checks on all employees and financial auditing that would detect any attempts to revive money laundering operations. Lily has developed a particularly close relationship with Detective Rachel Murphy, who has become something of a mentor for her criminal justice studies. Rachel's integrity throughout our crisis, her willingness to risk her career to help us expose corruption, has given Lily a model for the kind of law enforcement officer she wants to become. They often discuss cases and investigative techniques, and Rachel has helped Lily understand how honest police work can make a real difference in protecting communities. Dad's relationship with the community has been complicated by the publicity surrounding our case. Some people view him as a hero who exposed corruption at great personal cost, while others blame him for bringing criminal attention to the area that resulted in violence and disruption. He's learning to live with the reality that doing the right thing sometimes has consequences that extend beyond your own family, and that moral courage requires accepting responsibility for outcomes you couldn't completely control. I've started seeing someone new, a therapist who specializes in helping crime survivors rebuild their capacity for trust and intimacy. The betrayals we experienced, especially Mom's systematic deception and attempted murder, created psychological wounds that affect how I relate to everyone in my life. Learning to distinguish between reasonable caution and paralyzing suspicion is an ongoing process that requires professional help and patience with my own emotional reactions. The family cabin has been sold because none of us can bear to return to the place where we discovered the full scope of Mom's betrayal and nearly lost our lives to David's treachery. We've purchased a different property in a location that's not connected to our family history, a place where we can create new memories that aren't contaminated by trauma and violence. It's smaller than the old cabin but feels safer because it represents our future rather than our past. Our story has attracted national media attention, with several documentaries and true crime podcasts examining the case and its implications for understanding how organized crime infiltrates legitimate businesses and corrupts government institutions. While I appreciate the educational value of sharing our experience, the constant reminders of what we endured make it difficult to move forward with normal life. We've learned to be selective about which interviews we grant and how much detail we're willing to discuss publicly. The most important lesson I've learned is that family isn't defined by blood relationships or legal documents, but by loyalty, honesty, and willingness to sacrifice for each other's well-being. Maria, Rachel, Kevin, and even Tommy's family have become more trustworthy relatives than the people who shared our DNA but betrayed us for money and power. Real family is built through shared values and mutual protection, not inherited through genetics or marriage certificates. Looking toward the future, I'm cautiously optimistic about rebuilding a life that honors Dad's memory and protects the people we care about. The construction business is growing again, but slowly and carefully, with oversight systems that would prevent the kind of infiltration we experienced. Lily is excelling in her studies and developing the skills she'll need to help other families facing similar threats. Dad is healing physically and emotionally, learning to trust again while maintaining appropriate security precautions. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if Dad hadn't sent that desperate text message at 2 a.m, if Lily and I had trusted Mom's explanations and hadn't discovered the truth about Vincent's organization. Would we have eventually been eliminated quietly, with our deaths blamed on depression or accidents? Would Vincent's criminal network have continued expanding, victimizing more families and corrupting more government officials? The thought that our survival helped protect other people makes the trauma feel more meaningful, like Dad's sacrifice achieved something important. The question I get asked most often by people who hear our story is how we found the courage to keep fighting when everything seemed hopeless and everyone we trusted turned out to be dangerous. The answer is that courage wasn't really involved, we simply didn't have any choice except to fight or die. When survival becomes the only option, you discover reserves of strength and determination that you didn't know existed. The alternative to fighting was accepting that evil people would win and that good people like Dad and Tommy would have died for nothing. I want to leave you with a question that might help you think about your own relationships and the people you trust with your safety and secrets. If you received a message at 2 a.m. telling you to run and not trust someone you love, would you have the wisdom to recognize truth even when it contradicts everything you believed about your family? Would you have the courage to investigate painful possibilities and act on dangerous knowledge? Most importantly, would you be willing to sacrifice comfort and security to protect people you care about from threats they don't even recognize? Thank you for listening to our story and for supporting channels that share real experiences about surviving family betrayal and organized crime. Your engagement helps other people recognize warning signs and find resources when they face similar dangers. Please like this video if it helped you understand something important about trust and family dynamics. Subscribe for more true crime content that examines how ordinary families can become targets of criminal organizations. And share this story with anyone who might benefit from understanding these issues. Remember that speaking the truth about dangerous people is one of the most effective ways to protect innocent families from becoming their next victims. Stay safe, stay aware, and never hesitate to ask for help when something feels wrong about the people closest to you.